Holly Dolan is the Assistant Records Manager for Denton County, Texas. After beginning her career working in a university library, she joined the world of local government records management in 2016 and quickly learned that a little enthusiasm goes a long way. Holly believes that managing information is really about managing people and their behaviors. Holly holds an MLS in Archives and Digital Imaging, as well as a graduate certificate in Digital Curation and Data Management from the University of North Texas. All right, I'll turn it over to Holly now.
All right. Hey, everyone. Organizers, please let me know if at any time you can't hear me, because I want everyone to get all this information. First of all, like they said, thanks so much for being here. I'm really flattered that people show up to listen to me talk sometimes. It's exciting for me. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Again, this is simple ways to turn your records liaisons into records ambassadors. If you're here and you do not have records liaisons in your organization, no worries. This should apply to you as well. This is really about learning how to work with people when you're trying to pass down policy information and collaborate with them in any way, really. Thank you for the wonderful intro, Bonnie. Also do a little welcome from myself. Again, I'm Holly Dolan. I work for Denton County, Texas. I am in the Department of Technology Services and the Records Management Division, and I serve as the Assistant Manager in our division. Right, a little bit of background information about Denton County. Denton County has a population of a little over 750,000 people. Our government has over 1,700 employees at this time. It's fairly large. I work with 59 offices and departments for records management. We are a centralized records management office for the entire county. And that means that I work with over 68, I think we may be up to 70 at this point, 70 records liaison officers across the county. What that means in Denton County is that in all of these departments, a department head or an elected official can designate one or more people to liaise with our office for reasons like training and communicating about policy. If they have issues, they can be the one to bring them to our office. Hopefully they'll be trained enough to have a helpful conversation with our office, and we'll be able to work with them on any records management issues. So it's just a designation that happens within our government. So some background information. How did this presentation come about? So I've been working for Denton County for only a little bit over a year now. But when I started, I wrote a strategic plan for myself, for my new position. And in that strategic plan, I created a vision statement. And this is something that I wrote in that vision statement. I said that the position of assistant manager will be a valued records management resource for Denton County. And it will aid in the construction of a well-informed, enthusiastic, and proactive records liaison officer team. Now, if you work in government and you work with records liaison, you may be kind of rolling your eyes right now, because enthusiastic and proactive are not always words that we use to talk about people managing their records. So we really are shooting for the stars here. And I will say we're not at this point where we are all enthusiastic and proactive about our records, but this is my vision for the future. And I knew that to get to this place, this vision, I was going to have to make a plan, and I was going to have to be deliberate about it. So this presentation is what has transpired over the past year or so trying to make this vision happen, and it's going to be an ongoing process, of course. Here's a little overview of what I'm going to be talking about, and before I say that, I want to really encourage everyone to ask questions. If I was giving this in person, we would just have a conversation as I was talking, but we're not in person and I can't see all of you, but I don't want you to hesitate to ask questions as we're going along. This needs to be collaborative, and I want you to get just juice everything that you can out of this information. If I can't get to your question during this presentation, I'll be sure to follow up with you later. Okay, so the overview. We're going to talk about why ambassadors. Why am I obsessed with this idea of records ambassadors instead of records liaisons? I also want to talk about the challenges that I identified as I started this process. Then we're going to go into the nitty-gritty, setting expectations with people, creating a personal connection, how to design training in a way that's going to make people want to look at that training and hold their attention during that training. And then outreach with an exclamation point, because it is my favorite part of my job. All right, so then after we go through all of the fun stuff, I'm going to take everyone back down to earth with the being realistic section, because even with all of these great ideas, at the end of the day, you have to take a look at what you're really handling and how you can be realistic to make progress there. All right. First of all, why ambassadors? When I think of records liaisons, a lot of people get confused about that title. It's the title that we in records management use a lot of the time, but it's not what our customers use. But with the word liaison, I looked it up, and here were some of the synonyms that I got. With liaison, I saw words like intermediary. They are a middleman, a contact, or a go-between. It's not really a fun role. It's maybe a needed role. That's why we've named them liaisons for so long. But maybe there's a better term to use for that. Maybe we could use ambassadors. So ambassadors are champions. They're representatives, supporters of your program. Instead of just having somebody to connect with you when you need them, we want somebody who's proactive and championing our work and what we're doing in our departments. So this is why I am so obsessed with records ambassadors instead of records liaisons. Okay, so some of the challenges that I identified in my own government, internal and external challenges, may be similar to what you face when you're doing your own work. Internally, I was seeing that we had unclear expectations with our departments and our liaisons and a lot of the people who we were working with. They weren't really sure what their job as a records liaison was meant for, and we needed to fix that. There was no regular training with our liaisons. There was really no regular training with anyone in the county except for the training that we were relying on the Texas State Library and Archives to provide, which is great. They provide amazing training, obviously. I'm sure most of you have attended some, or you are right now. But we needed some sort of regular internal training to be happening. We had sporadic communication with people. We only talked to people, our liaisons, our department heads, anyone, when we needed information from them or we needed some high-level information to be sent to them, like a change in a retention schedule. Our complex policies, this is probably the same in your organizations as well. Our policies that we ourselves created were too complex. And then we also have all of the laws and regulations handed down to us that were very, very complex. And it's difficult to tell, 68 liaisons across a county how to follow all of these policies if they're going to have to practically read a novel to understand them. And tying into all of that, we didn't really have a standard message for how to manage records in Denton County, and we needed to change that for sure. Much of this was because we just had little time to dedicate to outreach. We were understaffed for a while, and because of that, a lot of these things fell through the cracks. Okay, so some external challenges are just the number of liaisons. We had so many people we're trying to communicate with, like the number of employees is so high. How do we as an department of 8 or 9 people connect with all of these people? Decentralized government makes it difficult. You're probably laughing at that one if you work for a decentralized government, because you have your department heads, you have your elected officials who all create their own policy, and then as one department, it's really difficult to try to send a clear message to all of those different people. Plus, just the diversity of county services and workflows makes it difficult to send down policies and procedures that are going to connect with people with all of these different workflows. So let's go on to setting expectations. Do we have any questions before we get started with that? Doesn't look like
Nope,
it.
no questions yet.
Okay. All right, so I went ahead and tried to start setting some expectations before we really dove into pushing out information to our liaisons. Before we set expectations, like I said before, our liaisons didn't really understand their role in the records management process. I would walk into an office and they would say, you know, I don't manage records. I'm not really sure why I've been asked to do this. I don't know why I have this responsibility. Or maybe it's even worse. Maybe it was even that they were not aware that they were designated as a records liaison with our office, which kind of scares me, but I've found that that's not very rare in organizations like ours, where some paper was signed at some point and that staff member never knew that they were designated as a records liaison officer. So we needed to fix that, and here's one of the first things that I did. I had a simple form redesign for designating a records liaison officer. Before we did this, we had a complicated form. For a while, it did not ask for a signature from both the department head and the staff member being designated, and we changed that to make sure that the signatures were there so that somebody knew that they were being designated. We wanted the policy information to be included on that form so that when somebody signs that form, they understand exactly what they're signing. So at the bottom of this form, it has information about the designation of records liaisons and the duties and responsibilities that they're agreeing to by signing this piece of paper. This may seem like a really obvious thing, but I don't think that it's obvious for everyone. And by making an official form, it turns it into an official process in people's heads. They understand that they are actually being asked to have a responsibility, and it is spelled out what that responsibility is. So more on setting expectations, I decided that we needed to summarize some policy information. So our policy information about records liaison officers was hidden in our records management program resolution that our county commissioners passed. And that was hidden in this policy document that you could find. If you could find it on our intrasite, you would need to go to page 4 of 8, which is on your screen right now, and then you would need to find section 8 and section 9. And then if you were able to do that, you would have to read all of this information and understand everything that we were trying to tell you about records liaisons. And when I saw this, I realized that that may not work for all of my 68 liaisons. I can't expect people to, on their own, go and find this document and interpret it to understand what their role is. So I wanted to make a way to clear up this message. And I did this by creating infographics. An infographic is exactly what it sounds like. It is a graphical representation of information. Here's one that I created for records liaison officers. This may be a little bit small on your screen, but when it's sent out to one of our customers or one of our officers, it'll be on a larger PDF so they can read that smaller text. So infographics are going to clear up that message. I use them to summarize this policy information in a graphically interesting way. Which one do you want to read? Do you want to read all of the small text on this policy document, or do you want to have it summarized with cute pictures and a lot of color? I personally want the color version. It also references the full policy. When they're reading this on a PDF, they will go down to the bottom and have a link to the full policy so that they can get the full information. I never want to exclude any information from anyone. A second version, I made a infographic to be a 60-second read for what people need to know about managing records in Denton County. If I can't hold your attention for more than 60 seconds, hopefully you can read the information on this graphic. It tells you about what a record is, what a retention schedule is, and why we ask people to manage records. I actually made this one fairly recently to show people how to read a retention schedule. So instead of me sending them an email or relying on the information in the schedule itself, I sent out this graphic to let them know what each of the cells in our retention schedule mean, in kind of a fun comic book way that makes it engaging and interesting to look at. So some tools that you can use for infographics, not officially endorsing any one of them. I personally use Canva, and I've never spent more than $1 on a graphic because sometimes you'll want to buy an image. They do have free images as well. You can also use other tools like Easily or PictoChart to create graphics. You really can make graphics like this if you have no information or background about graphic design. It's so easy to do, and it'll be really fun for your customers, and it helps your liaisons and other customers understand the information that you're trying to push out to them. So setting expectations. I did a couple of really small things, and before, people didn't understand their role. They didn't understand why they were being asked to have that role. But afterwards, I noticed that liaisons, when I met with them, they had a better understanding of why I was talking to them, why I was showing up in their office or giving them a phone call. They understood why they had their responsibility. And I am proud to say now that all of our liaisons are aware of their designation. That should be pretty obvious. It should be an easy thing, but it's not always as easy as it sounds. Okay. I'm going to go on. Ask questions if you have them. Please do. I want this to be interactive if you have any questions at all. So creating a connection, to be able to have a meaningful conversation about records and about workflows, you have to create a connection with people. I've noticed that when I show up in somebody's office space or request a meeting with someone, they tend to assume that I'm some sort of auditor or that I'm there to tell them that everything that they're doing is wrong. But that's really not the case with me, and it's not the case for most of us records managers. We really are trying to help people create better workflows if they need to, but really do their work more efficiently and work smarter, not harder. So we were kind of not doing great about creating a connection with people before. Most of our communication was done through an occasional email, only when we needed to converse with someone. We never went out of the way to make a connection. We did have a few engaged liaisons who voluntarily came to some meetings and some trainings. They were interested in the topic. But in reality, most of our less engaged liaisons were just never heard from. We just never had any questions or information about their office. So we really weren't doing right by their office by not reaching out. We needed to create some sort of line of communication there. And because of this, there was a bit of a poor perception of our services from many of our departments. They either didn't understand what we were doing or why we were doing it, or they kind of had pigeonholed us into a couple of key duties, like we were the people who take your boxes away and put them in the warehouse when you need us to. Well, yes, we will do that, and we're happy to do that, but we also can provide consultation services and generally advise on your records more than simply storing records for retention. So in order to create a connection, I decided that I wanted to have one-on-one meetings with every liaison who would meet with me. This was difficult. Yeah, it's really time-consuming to meet with, at the time it was a little bit over 50 people, especially when I was a new employee and just getting my feet under me. But it was so helpful. I created a standardized assessment for me to assess every department that I met with. I needed to understand the basic workflow of their department so that I could advise them as my job required. But there's a caveat there. I did not want to give them a form to fill out or give them a survey to give us feedback. I believe that people have survey fatigue when you're being asked to fill out a survey every time you buy something, every time you sign up for something, and every time you get a new job, new employees, they never want to fill out a new survey. When you're given a survey like this, you don't want to give every piece of information that you might. So I created this worksheet, but I wanted it to be me filling the worksheet out and not my customers. So this worksheet asked about our training needs, about our department's training needs. I emphasized in these meetings, we're not here to audit you. We're here to understand your needs, and we're here to understand how to better our department. We want to improve our services to better serve you. And we're always available to answer your questions. I would say this 5 times during a meeting just to make sure that they knew we were there for records knowledge. And the next time they had a question about a record, they were going to pick up the phone and call our department. But I was sitting there with a clipboard writing notes on my worksheet. I never handed this over to my customer, my liaison, who I call my customer sometimes. So before I did that, like I said, people were not engaged. They didn't have a lot of communication from us. They had a poor perception of us. But after I did these meetings and started forming a human connection, in these meetings we didn't only talk about records. We talked about their jobs, how they got started in their jobs, how the county had evolved since they started working here. And after the liaisons were more comfortable communicating with me and everyone in my department through email, by phone, and sometimes just stopping through the office. We have full training classes, and yes, we have training classes now. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we have full training classes now. Many of our liaisons are proactive about asking for help. They ask for help and they ask for consultations. Our calendars are filling up with consultations now because it's a large county and people need help with their records. They just didn't know that that's what we were there for before. And I'm seeing a positive perception and better understanding of our services from a lot of the departments who didn't understand before. All right, and now it's designing training. So like I said before, we had no regular records management training provided internally. We did have TSLAC come in and provide training, I think a few times for us, and then we had a few meetings and other informal training sessions that were provided no more than once or twice a year. But again, with 1,700 employees, that's maybe not enough. Because of this, I was seeing a county-wide lack of understanding of core records management concepts. What I mean by core records management concepts is understanding what is a record and what is a non-record. When I requested meetings with some of my liaisons, they were very intent on telling me that they did not manage records. But that means that I was not doing my job by training everyone, and that records might be just your email. They're not always paper records. Even if you're not managing the retention of your records, you're managing the creation and the storage of them. Just core concepts. I was seeing a need for online and in-person training options. Because we are so geographically spread out in our county, many of our departments are not able to go all the way to our home base, our training rooms for a long training course, or even if it's a short training course, they can't drive all the way there for a 1-hour training. So my first step in training was to design a Records Management 101 class. And to the side on your screen, you'll see the ad that I made for that training. This was training offered to all employees, so we're not just talking about records liaisons right now, but I did give priority registration to our records liaisons because I saw them as the first line of defense in managing records in the county. In this ad, you'll see that it's marketed to show relevance to all departments. So it asks, do you store documents in your desk or your computer? Do you request time off? Do you send or receive emails? If you're doing any of these things, then you manage records. And I believe that all of our employees probably do all of these things, but at least do one or two of them. And this training starts at the very beginning of these records management topics, and it builds to be more complex. It teaches records management problem solving, and that's important because I know in any sort of training, I'm not going to be able to teach every person the minutia of training their own records because we have such a diversity of workflows, because all of us have very different jobs. You know, what Susie in the sheriff's office needs to know is not going to be the same as what Sharon in the auditor's office need to know. If you're working in a jail and working in an auditor's office, it's going to be very different information about managing records that you need. But if you teach things like problem solving, just those core concepts, so that when they have their own problems, they're able to either remember the information they learned in class or at least remember where that information is located on our SharePoint and on various websites, and just by picking up the phone and asking a question, then they're able to get their problem solved. It also includes games, activities. It's interactive. It's not just a presentation. We are very lucky to have TSLAC as a resource. So I will say that some of the games on there we just kind of flat out stole from TSLAC because they have some really great stuff in their Records Intro 101 class, which hopefully a lot of you have been able to attend. Oh, here's some sample slides of my training. So switch your brain over and pretend that you're a person in my class right now. I wrote some objectives for this class. I wanted the objectives to be people who, things that people could take back to their office and actually be able to do. They were action items. So after this training, you should be able to apply basic principles of records management to your job, differentiate a record from a non-record, explain your role in managing Denton County records, locate the retention schedule and categorize your records into the correct record series, and then design a file plan for your office records, and simply employ some techniques to manage your email records. We don't go all the way into email in this first training because, as you all may know, it's just too much for one class, but that's what all of my students should be able to do when they leave that first class. And I wrote those objectives by using what's called Bloom's taxonomy of action verbs. So my dad works in instructional design, so he tipped me off to this. Bloom's taxonomy is a way that you write course objectives in academia. So I looked at this taxonomy and I decided that instead of saying things like, you should be able to know how to do this, know how to do that, no, you should be able to actually do things. And here are the words that show what you'll be able to do. So instead of knowing how it applies to your job, you should be able to apply the principles. That's an action verb. So look up Bloom's taxonomy. It's great, especially if you're doing a lot of training. Here's another slide from that Records Management 101 training. talking about what a record series is. I say a record series is a group of records that serve the same function, so we keep them for the same length of time. So as an example, we might have a series called employment applications, but it includes a lot of different types of documents, like an application form, cover letter, resume, letters of reference, and transcripts. But all of these different documents make up one record series called employment applications. So it's graphically interesting too. It's something for them to look at. I encourage people when they're in this class not to take a lot of notes. They're going to get the presentation in their email after they attend the class. So just listen and learn and get those core concepts as you're in the class. Here's a game we do. I have them look at this picture and pretend they're in a business meeting and say, on what mediums and devices are records being created in this meeting? So there are some papers, a phone, a tablet, a laptop, sticky notes. It's rare, but maybe you're creating a record on that sticky note. I play another game called Is This a Record? And I show an example of a record. Like, this is a text message conversation about somebody asking off for work. And they let me know if they think it's a record or not. This one is. It actually teaches them also that text messages could be government records. So that's the end of the 101 class. In designing my training too, with every training that I do, I want to have an evaluation. But as I said before, I'm concerned with people having survey fatigue, so I don't want it to be a long evaluation. I want to get the bottom line. Is it relevant to you? Was it easy for you to understand, and will it help you in your job? Those are the 3 things that I need to know if I'm doing well in teaching this class. I also have some open-ended questions on there. What part did they enjoy? What part could we improve? And what additional topics could we cover? They can leave those blank if they want to, though. I just want them to answer 3 questions for me. So I send this out online if I'm doing some sort of online handout, but I also give this to people in paper if they are in an in-person class with me. So very simple evaluations are important for STEER and training. And I'll do a little brag on this one because I think it's important about how we've designed our training in our department. Every single person that's taken our 101 class has looked at this question and said this training was relevant to my office or department. Oh, I'm sorry, it was this one. This training will help me do my job better. And they've either agreed or strongly agreed to that statement, that what they learned in this class is going to help them in their job. So I think that really speaks to how our department has shown how records management is applicable to all the different people in our county. All those different workflows, all those different services that we provide. I also know that there are some people who are never going to show up to a in-person class. They're never going to even do a long online class. So I started creating quick guides for those people. These are for the less engaged liaisons, the people who either have very, very busy work days and can't leave for training, or they're just not interested, because we all have those people who are just never going to be interested. These guides give department-specific information. It's not generalized. It shows how it's applicable to different jobs within the county. So this one, the example that you're getting was basic information for county and district courts and the people working within those courts. It shows why it's relevant to them and also the core records concepts that they would be getting if they were in a class. I also have a second page that's sent out with this that has some sample retention information, just so they can get a glimpse of what we're talking about when we talk about records retention, because many people don't really understand the relevance of records retention until they see that it includes documents that they are handling, like correspondence or maybe leave requests. So these are quick read-throughs for people who may not show up to class. We also have a drop-in option. So I call these my office hours. Some people are too shy to schedule a one-on-one consultation. Some people are not interested in coming to a longer training course. So we have a way for them to just come to our training rooms in our technology services building and ask whatever questions they need while they're there. This was a partnership with our technology training services. We have a technology trainer who teaches things like Microsoft Office, Microsoft Outlook. I'm going to her OneNote class next week, which I'm really excited about. We also have technicians on site if they need help with configuring their smartphone, if they need help with our GIS services, which are important for a lot of our planning offices and law enforcement that we work with. But while this is all going on, they can ask records management questions. Sometimes they just see that, I'm sitting right there and they remember that they had a question, which is helpful too. So we have these every fourth Wednesday of the month, and it's kind of a fun day. We provide snacks and coffee and drinks for the people who are there. We're also looking to develop an on-site option for this drop-in training for some of our annexed locations. We have government centers in a few different cities. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do some events over there where people will be able to drop in and ask technology questions. And I think that this is important because it does help people start to associate managing records with technology, which hasn't always been the case in the past. I still don't see any questions, so I think that means that I'm explaining everything really, really well. But again, I'm going to encourage everyone to ask questions. If you don't want to do it right now, I'll post my email up later. You can ask me personally. So designing training. Before, no regular records management training provided internally. That was causing a lack of understanding from all of our liaisons, and because of that, everyone in the county. So now we have a monthly Records Management 101 training, and like I said, those classes are full. I think for the first 6 months at least, we had full registration in every class. It started to die down a little bit, but we are doing some outreach to get registration from new employees when they first get their new employee paperwork. They'll be sent a link to register for the training if they're interested. So that might get us full classrooms again. We're seeing frequent referrals to trainings by our liaisons. They're excited about the training that we're providing, so they're telling their departments. Because of this, we've actually done in-department training for 2 of our departments, for our AgriLife Extension Service and for our emergency services, invited us to come into their offices and present the Records Management 101 training to all of their staff. So now I'm very proud of this. Now every single person in Denton County Emergency Services has been trained on records management. Very exciting. Those are the kinds of things that I get excited about as a records manager. I've also found out recently that now this training is mandatory for everyone who works in our county clerk's office because of referrals by our records liaisons. And because of this, it's a better basic understanding of records management countywide. When I have conversations with people about records, I am seeing that they have those core concepts down, so we can get into a better conversation about their workflows and about managing the records on a higher level. I'm also developing some online options. I'm using a tool to convert that in-person 101 class into an online course, which will be broken up into shorter modules. Right now, our 101 class is 4 hours long, which is very long. So the online version will be broken up into smaller trainings to see if we can get even more people trained, people who either can't make it in person or do not have the time to dedicate to a full 4-hour training. Really exciting. After that, the world will open up. We're going to do email training. We're going to do a training for just managers and supervisors. It's going to be a whole new world of records management. They do not even know yet. All right, outreach with an exclamation point. Before I get into this, so I'm getting a question here. Have you considered making the trainings required? Do you feel like that is necessary to make sure everyone knows what their role is? I think that in a perfect world, thanks for that question, Courtney. Yeah, that's something that I was interested in as soon as I started through this. In a perfect world, it would be required. Our county has a few required trainings for all employees. Because there are already, I think it's 3 or 4 required trainings, we would need to pass it through our commissioner's court to make it mandatory for every employee, and that's a very difficult process. We're hoping in the future that something like that can happen, but before that can happen, we're still just trying to get as many people trained as we can in the interim. So I'm crossing my fingers about that one, but again, it's going to be a longer process to make that happen. Possibly, more likely, we'll be able to have it required just for records liaisons, not for all employees. But again, that would take some buy-in from department heads and our county commissioners. But that actually ties into my next section really well, because before we get that buy-in from people, we need to do a lot of outreach to make sure that people understand what we do in records management and why it's important for people to be trained. Before we started this initiative to create a solid records management program, our department had little time to dedicate to outreach. That's one of the reasons that my position it wasn't created, but it was kind of rewritten to be more of an outward-facing position for the county. There was just no time for the people in my department who already were working on digitization and warehouse and retention for the entire county to do outreach activities. That means that our outreach was sporadic. We had some newsletters and things that we sent out, but we mostly reposted them from other organizations when we found a good resource out there. Because of that, because we weren't using our own content, we didn't have a consistent message. And I think that when you're working in records management, it's important to have a consistent message about your own records, about your own organization. So it becomes very applicable to the staff that you're working with. Little original content, I kind of already covered that one. Can y'all let me know how I'm doing on time, Bonnie, when you have a chance?
Yeah, we've still got a good 15 minutes or so, and
cool. Okay.
Yeah, you're doing good.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I kind of love outreach. I love working with people. I love telling people what I do, and I love people gaining more information about their jobs. And I think that that's something that people get when they learn about records management. So one of the first things that I did was I created this tagline. It's our Ask Us tagline, and I will say that I kind of stole this from a library that I used to work with. It's not completely original. We had an information desk at a library I worked with once who had a sign that said Ask Us behind the desk. So if people came up and saw that it was a reference desk and didn't understand what reference was, they would know that that's the place where you ask questions. I wanted to adopt this tagline so that people would know that records management is a knowledge base. We are a knowledge base for records management across the county. We're not just about storing records. We're not just about records retention. We're about answering questions. I was really proud of this because it was actually adopted by our technology services department. The entire department uses this at times now. So even when somebody calls our help desk and asks a technology question, if they get an email from a help desk technician, this will be in that help desk technician's email signature. So they've kind of adopted this tagline and this logo that we created from the tagline. It reiterates our approachability too. We are not scary records managers. We're not here about auditing records all of the time. We are about making sure that you know how to do your job as it relates to records. I also use it in other ways besides just this little logo that we made out of it. I like to incorporate it into other graphics. So this is one we made that just says, ask us about one-on-one consultation, about records training for your staff, and about signing up for our Records Management 101 training. This sign I put up in events, if we're doing countywide events where there will be staff there. It's around, I'll put it up in the training room if I'm doing a training. So it's incorporated in other ways. So when people see that Ask Us tagline, hopefully they will start thinking about records management and our department and what we do. Outreach. Another thing we started doing is holiday messages. These are just fun and informative messages that are not serious. They're not all about policy. They're not boring. Not every message that you send to your liaisons or to your customers has to be so serious and in a formal tone. So these are some Valentines that I sent out last Valentine's Day that had some records management vocabulary words on them. These were featured in the TSLAC blog, so maybe you saw them there. Hopefully you will use these in your organization if you think that they're fun. I think that they're very fun. So they say things like, you are the custodian of my heart, or Valentine, I find you administratively valuable. These are really funny things to us as records management officers and records managers. And I found that for my liaisons, they were really fun too. We started getting a lot of feedback from people when we sent out fun items like this. I also sent out a New Year's message that just had a graphic saying, you know, Happy New Year's. Do you have a resolution to be more organized? Because that's part of records management. And I gave them some action items to follow up with managing records. These are the ways that you can be more organized through managing records. I actually made another one. Let's see if I can, oops, excuse me, see if I can bring it up because it would be fun. So this is one that's going out. I hope y'all can see that. This is one that will be going out for Halloween. It just says, have a spooky Halloween. Underneath it, it will say, does clearing out your file cabinet make you want to scream? And does your email box look a little spooky? Things like that, and be sure to call us for a consultation. So a little bit of advertising goes a long way. I also wanted to start creating unique newsletters because we were cross-posting from a lot of other agencies when we made newsletters. But I wanted to make newsletters that said Denton County on them. These newsletters were graphically interesting. I wanted them to be useful to all or at least most of our employees with an interesting title. Every time I send out a newsletter, I want to bold those vocabulary words too, so that when people start reading, they don't turn their brains off as soon as they don't understand something. So it has that vocab word, it has that records management term, and then it defines it within the newsletter. It's not above anybody's head. This is a quick sidebar. When I'm creating all these materials, I have to ask myself, am I writing clickbait? I'm not being completely serious when I say this, but when I have a title that says defensible destruction, read this before you shred that, I sort of feel like I'm writing for BuzzFeed. If you don't know what clickbait is, these are some examples of clickbait. Those are the online articles that have ridiculous titles just to make sure that people will click on them. Examples like 19 tweets anyone addicted to Diet Coke will completely relate to, or we dare you not to get this kid's song stuck in your head. You want to click on those things because they sound interesting. So some friends and I made a couple of records management clickbait titles that I just want to share with you real quick before we wrap up. 5 reasons why you should worry about document retention. I would click on that article. These people are retaining their data and you won't believe why. I would definitely want to read that. Don't delete another email until you've read this. That is records management clickbait. And I don't really want to be creating clickbait, even though it's fun and funny for me to think about it that way. But I do want to have professional and eye-catching titles when I create outreach materials. So here's an example. It just says 4 ways to tell if you're the record holder. This is a list. That's something that BuzzFeed and other big news organizations use because they're easy to read. It has a call to action. This is a way to tell if you're the record holder. So people relate to that. It's immediately relatable. That doesn't mean that it's sensationalized or dumbed down like an actual clickbait article. I also put this second graphic in here to show you that sometimes I have a long version and a short version of a graphic, just to have the long version to give to people in a handout or to send to them directly. A short version might be tacked on to another newsletter or something. I also created swag for outreach. We use coasters as handouts for a lot of our trainings and other presentations and things. This one I wanted to be relatable and fun for people, so I used the Keep Calm, I guess it's sort of a meme now, but the Keep Calm poster design. It says Keep Calm and call records management, and it has our records management contact information on it. I wanted swag that was useful, so people would actually put this coaster on their desk and use it every day. So we would be constantly visible to them. If we have constant visibility in our county, then we can start providing them constant service. We can be consistent. We can not drop out of people's minds that we're there to help. Also, coasters are very inexpensive. There are also pens and buttons and other fun items out there that are relatively inexpensive to use as swag. So they've been pretty popular around our county. So after we provided more outreach, we're prioritizing it. It's a priority for our department. Like I said, it's consistent visibility. We're consistent about pushing our message out. So we're giving constant service to people because they remember that we're there. And we're sending a clear message. That message is across the board, consistent, and easy for people to understand because it's graphically interesting and it's a similar message every time. The original content also helps users relate. By original content, I mean that we're not cross-posting, we're not grabbing a newsletter from an organization. It has Denton County's name on it, so people who work for Denton County find it relatable. Okay, so being realistic, I have all these pie in the sky dreams about records management, but at the end of the day, I need to come back to earth and remember that I'm not going to reach everyone. The picture on your screen says, what I hear when I'm being yelled at is people caring loudly at me. And this is from one of my favorite TV characters, Leslie Knope, who is very enthusiastic about helping her constituents, even when her constituents are yelling at her. I had this mindset when I started working for local government, and I really just thought that everyone eventually would come over to my side and realize that records management was the most important thing in the world. But when I'm realistic, I realize that that is not the case, and I'm not going to touch every person. That being said, that doesn't mean that I can't try. I have been told in the past that you know, these people may laugh in your face if you walk in and tell them that you want to, like, hear about their training needs or learn about their workflows in their departments. And even though I've got all that feedback, I still have made so much progress, and by I mean my team and I'm not taking all the credit for this, have still made all of this progress in pushing out records information to our entire county. So just because you can't reach everyone doesn't mean that you shouldn't be realistic and you shouldn't be consistent. So no, people are not carrying loudly at me when they yell, but I can still be consistent in my message. Okay, questions and comments. I think officially we're sort of out of time, but if anyone has questions, I think that I may have missed a couple. Somebody asked, what kind of regular training do I do? Right now, the regular training is just the 101 class, but we will be eventually providing an email class and a manager supervisor class because we want to train people on things like exiting employees, what to do with their records, also information regarding using text messages for conversations with your employees, the pros and cons of that, what counts as records when people request time off, those supervisory things. So right now it's the 101 class, and then we have one-on-one consultations for people who need more information, but the regular training is one-on-one. Somebody asked, is the training yearly? Right now it is monthly. We may go to once every 2 months if our registration declines, but right now we are getting more than half full registration consistently. Many training materials are in the handouts, but yes, I'm willing to share anything that you need for training materials. Somebody asked if I would be willing to share training materials. Yes, mix, reuse, share, however you want, and just contact me for that. Okay, do we have time for any more questions, or should I answer these later, Bonnie?
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay.
We have some time.
Okay. So somebody asked, thank you for the information. Should our training be considered one and done or annually training? I guess that depends on who you're working with. If you can get people to train annually, I would ask that of them because people are going to forget information, even if it's biannually or they come to a refresher session every once in a while. I think that's better than one and done because I do have some liaisons that I work with who have been to a training very far in the past that when I met with them, I realized that they didn't have some of those core concepts down. I also have a couple of liaisons who have been to my 101 class twice now, just because they wanted to go to it once, and then after going back to their office and seeing more of their records management issues, decided that they wanted to go through the class again to be proactive and make sure that they were making the right decisions. Document management system, that is a simple question with a difficult answer. Someone asked, what document management system do you use? We use several over the county because we have so many different departments. So for document management, the only one that every department uses is SharePoint. We also are implementing a physical records management system using InfoLinks right now in our department. If you have more questions about that, Gerardo, let me know and I can chat with you about it. Any other questions? Any other comments about the questions on the page? Is any of this worked for you? Anything else has worked for you for engaging people? Anything that you would have done differently if you were me? I completely welcome constructive criticism. Any organizational structures that affect your outreach efforts?
I have a quick question, Holly. Personal kind of personal question.
Yeah.
What if someone didn't have, you have an eye for design, and obviously you have a little bit of background in instructional design, so what kind of empowering or encouragement would you give to somebody who doesn't have that background in design?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that one up, because it really looks like I have an eye for design because of the materials that I've created. That sounds like I'm really bragging on my materials, but I guess I sort of can. I can be bold about that. But if you don't have an eye for design, or if you've never designed anything before, there are really tools out there with templates that you can remix with your own information. I'll bring up again this Halloween design that I made. Have a spooky Halloween from everyone at Records Management. This was created on a program called Canva, and all I did was just put in the word spooky, because I wanted it to say spooky instead of happy. I thought that that was cute. And then I put in from everyone at Records Management instead of some other text that was on this template. There are templates out there for you to use and remix. I also added in the picture of our courthouse behind it because I thought that it made it more relatable. So there are templates that you can use. If you go back to, let's see if I can get back to it real quick. If you go back to this, 4 ways to tell if you're the records holder, I put all of this information in from a template. So this is not really my original design. I made this design for free, just kind of remixing it for something that was already out on the web. So look at a tool like Canva, Easily, or Pictochart. Find an infographic or other sort of graphic that works for you and just put in your own information. You don't have to be an expert to be successful with that. It's also really fun to work on. So sometimes when I'm staring at spreadsheets for too long, I'll go and design some outreach materials because it's fun for me. I also want to ask y'all, keep asking me questions. I think that our questions have died down in the session, but if you want to personally ask me a question, give me a call or email me. You are completely welcome to do that. Oh, somebody said, I need to take this on. Your webinar has been inspiring. That's very sweet, Cheryl. I love talking to people about our creative, innovative things that we do related to records management because that's what I geek out on. So if you found something in here that you're interested in and you want to try it yourself, contact me about it because it energizes me to have these conversations with other records managers who are going to, maybe use an idea that we thought of here in Denton County, and I'll probably end up using an idea that you're thinking of in your own organizations. So here's my information, and I think I'm going to, as long as there are no other questions, I'm going to throw it back to Bonnie. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending.